Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have a terrific day ahead of you, as always. In today's version of EYN, it will likely be a shorter one than usual, just because there's not as much to speak about, at least yet. We've still got the Wednesday Champions League games to come, and who knows, maybe they'll provide some changes for us. But I take a look at Gyokeres versus Joao Pedro, Arsenal and Crystal Palace assets, as well as the game, some popular transfer ins and some exciting players that you could be looking at, and a few other things as well. In addition to that, as promised, my introduction would include my final game week review, given I still had Bowen to play, and he probably got the most deserved two-pointer of his career. Outside of a good save from Kelleher in the first half and a snapshot which Bowen blazed over the bar, I think the ball bobbled, he had nothing. And it was a very, very, very poor performance from West Ham, and probably not an optimal approach from Nuno Espirito Santo either, which led to, like I said, one of the most deserving, if not the most deserving two-pointer of his career. So that's that. Overall, though, still a very good game week and a good start to the wildcard. Not much else needs to be said in the introduction. So if you do enjoy, a like, a hype, a subscribe, all would be greatly appreciated. And for those of you who don't know what a hype is, you essentially swipe right on the comment section and you're able to hype the video, and it'll just be boosted on the algo. And you get 3 per week. So 1 would be greatly appreciated. And apart from that, that's all that needs to be said. So I hope you have a terrific day as always and enjoy. To start with, not only the standout fixture of the game week, but also the assets from the two respective teams, and that is, of course, Arsenal versus Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace, for me, are one of the best suited teams, if not, and genuinely, they may be the best suited team to causing Arsenal some problems, real problems, at least defensively at the moment. If you look at Arsenal, they present you with such a unique problem. At least against most, if not all sides, you can play through their block and you can make chances in that fashion. Whether they're at the stage of being a low block and you can actually get them pinned there, or when they're in a mid block, right? Or even if they're in a high block pressing, you can get through in some capacity, either through your own quality or through some deficiencies on their side. But with Arsenal, whether they are in that 4-4-2 mid block or you manage to even pin them deep, which we'll come on to, and how rare that is, breaking that down is, it's not impossible, of course, but it's very, very, very challenging. And I don't think I've seen a single team be able to create a proper chance, like a really good chance, from some good play against that, because they're so good and they make it just so difficult to play through. So the first thing I like to speak about is actually your opportunity to even pin Arsenal in that deep block and try and create from there. That's so rare, right? To be able to progress the ball and to do enough good things on the pitch, whether that be little combinations, triangles, switches, some more coached methods through certain patterns to get them into that deep block, well, that's very, very, very infrequent, right? So you're not really expecting to get Arsenal there. You're really expecting, when you have the ball, to face that man-to-man high press, which can be very, very difficult to deal with, and is, and also to try and get through that mid block, which is, again, an extremely difficult task, right? And no one's really been able to do it successfully to any real extent. So the only real way I see it, you're going to exploit Arsenal, because it's certainly not going to be on set pieces. It might, but it's just very improbable, is in transition. Now, not only are Crystal Palace extremely good at creating these situations, I messed it up. Not only are they extremely good at exploiting these situations, but with the way they play and the lack of ego in particular, and Oliver Glasner's mindset, they're very good at creating these type of specific situations for themselves. Take Manchester City. They come to the Emirates. Yeah, they score that Haaland goal. They get that one moment. But outside of that, nothing. They're pinned so far and they face so many waves of pressure that even to generate those transitions in the first place when the ball turns over, it's so difficult because of the distances that you need to do them over and Arsenal's defensive transition weapons. Whereas with Palace, I think with their block, so well coached, so many good players as well, I think they'll be a little bit more aggressive in their defensive approach than Manchester City were. And then they have the players to exploit it in Mateta, in Munoz, in Sarr in particular, right? Those three, and Adam Wharton's passing. How many times will these situations be created where it's actually on for Palace and they can score? It shouldn't be too many when you consider the quality of the Arsenal defense, but I think they'll get chances. And if they just have a good period in the game, then you could see a fair little flurry of chances, right? As they did against Liverpool. Obviously, a much easier defense to come up against, but still nonetheless, they've shown the capacity against a good side, even though they're not in the best form, to create a lot in a little period of time, because again, of the quality. So of all the teams, I genuinely think Palace may be the best suited to exploiting Arsenal at some point. And I wouldn't be surprised if they scored as such. That being said, the reason I even have to have this discussion in the first place is because of how good Arsenal are. And if they don't, if Arsenal manage to essentially block that path to goals through, just maybe spectacular retention on the day, through a slightly more risk-averse game model, then I think Palace will struggle, as pretty much anyone would on the planet. You still expect Arsenal to get it done, but of all the teams that Arsenal are going to face, I think this is the most likely one to maybe cause them an upset. At least in terms of FPL, your clean sheet going, right? I'd say there may be no better team to take the clean sheet away, in particular. Even if they go on to win the game 3-1, 4-1, the clean sheet, I'm not really expecting them to keep personally this game because I think Palace will create enough and they'll take one. Moving on to their assets, minus Gyokeres for both teams because he's in the next slide. I still look at this fixture and I still look at Saka's performance level at the moment. And I look at that matchup against Mitchell, who I'm not the biggest fan of, and I think he could really have a good day against him 1v1. And if you do need someone to break a block and create a moment of magic and generate an attack and return in that type of situation, Saka's going to be up there as one to do so. Hopefully not as like the pre-assister, but whether it be creating a shot for himself, or crossing the box, a good little pass, a cutback when he takes Mitchell, he brings him inside and then he goes on the outside and cuts it back. Generating an assist like that, I can see that happening. And especially with the form and the fact that he's got set pieces, and I expect him to definitely keep penalties now that Gyokeres has a brace. And it doesn't really seem like he wanted to give it up in the Fulham game either, when it was initially given. I'd say he's a very, very, very good asset. Not only just for this game, but also going forward. Burnley away, Sunderland away, because mentally it looks like he might have gone up a gear and in a bit more of a ruthless time in his career. So I think he's really good. Like I said with the Arsenal assets, I don't think it's necessary to bring in a defender this game because Percy, I think they're going to concede. However, it's an extremely safe play. You're going to want them down the line. If it saves you some money, by all means, I think it's perfectly fair. And thanks to the DEFCON guy on X, Tom Hadley, I read that every single centre-back against Palace has achieved DEFCON. So even if they do concede, for them to concede 2 would take a lot. Gabriel's still probably looking at 4 points, which is good. Never mind the set pieces that he could score from, even if he doesn't keep a clean sheet. But your Timbers, your Calafiores this particular week, I try and hold off. I think Game Week 10 is a better entry point. In terms of the Palace assets, if you're definitely going to bring him in anyway, right, then I don't mind it as much this week on the attacking front. However, in most cases, whether it be Gyokeres or Joao Pedro or like someone else or a midfielder, you probably could wait, and I don't mind doing so. But of all the teams, like I said, to exploit Arsenal, I think they're the best suited. In which case, if you did want to bring in Matessa or Sarr this week, because you really don't like Gyokeres or your other forward or a mid, I don't think it's a bad idea at all. The defenders, I would probably wait off because I don't expect them to keep a clean sheet. There are certain situations where I think it's completely okay to sell Victor Gyokeres this week, irrespective of his brace last night. Those situations include where you need to use the cash or you want to use the cash in another position for an upgrade, and you're happy to move into a Mateta, let's say, a game week earlier than the fixture ticker would suggest, because you think he has good prospects good enough prospects against Arsenal to get a return. And honestly, with everything on paper, if there is going to be someone to do it, as I discussed in the last section, I think it'd be a decent. He'd be certainly, well, not only decent, but he'd be right up there, right? And there's that. Maybe not only do you just want an upgrade in the midfield department or the defensive department, but even Mateta aside, you really lack another forward and you want to go there. You're so impressed by Igor Thiago in terms of what he did against West Ham. You think Liverpool are all over the place and there to be exploited, and you take him, right? As an example, right? And then use all of that money to get an even bigger upgrade elsewhere. Maybe you just don't fancy his chances against what will likely be a very disciplined and probably more defensive approach from Crystal Palace in this game. And to be honest, what he's shown so far is not really something that would be representative of him having this great game, at least in terms of goal scoring and output against Crystal Palace. Even against Fulham, the situations that were generated for him, I remember one in the left channel, a snapshot late on from a Saka pass. Those are more so the type of things I think he'll be able to get against Palace, like these snappy, very quick, instinctual type of moments. And he hasn't really shown the capacity to put those away. And the luck hasn't really been on his side in those moments. And as such, maybe you just don't like his prospects for that. Maybe also you want to do a combination of those things and have a third Arsenal spot open for Burnley away, Sunderland away, and the rest, because you want to go Saka, right? And if you don't have Saka, I'd really be prioritizing him there. You want Eze, you want Timber, you want Calafiori, who had a rest in the UCL game, and I think that's going to be good for his expected minutes going forward, even though Lewis Skelly, especially for that goal, did really well. And that goal, honestly, that assist was amazing. I was so impressed with that. So in all those situations, I think it's very fair to sell him, irrespective of the brace last night, because I don't think the performance necessarily warranted it. Right? I don't think he generated enough threat, or the team generated enough threat for him, whereby you would say, oh yeah, that was a performance that really deserved it. In addition to that, the goals, are they particularly replicable? Well, one thing with their set piece routines is it never usually ends like that. In the back of the net, sure, but Gabriel getting a pass off, essentially, into someone else, not as much. It's usually just a direct header. And if he is going to get it, what's the probability that's going to fall to Gyokeres anyway, right? There's Saliba, there's Calafiori, there's Timber, right, in the box. And depending on the side, like you'll have others as well. So, like, those two goals I don't think are particularly replicable. And when they've been taking set pieces, he hasn't looked like the biggest box threat. And in general, we've seen in games in open play that he's not the biggest box threat when it comes to headers either. So, and the first goal just was quite lucky. But yeah, those situations, like those snappy, instinctual situations could be generated for him. The type that Chris Ward scored a lot from last season. But is he going to take it? I'm not so sure. And the volume against a very good Crystal Palace side, who probably take a more defensive approach, will be on the lesser side. So, yeah. But if you didn't want to sell him, again, I think like Arsenal is still Arsenal. They'll have a few moments, absolutely. He'll probably still have at least a few half moments, like I've spoken about. You've got Burnley away and Sunderland away. Maybe you want to keep him for that. I understand, right? I think either is okay, especially on the selling side, the things I've talked about. So that's that. With JP, I'd give him one more. With Sunderland at home, personally, right, and we're going to get onto this in the next slide, I think the defense has been a little bit lucky. And Tony, if you're listening to this, I apologize, my friend, but that is my opinion. And as such, if there is to be improved dynamics, right? Like, this is the main thing, right? If there are improved attacking dynamics for Joao Pedro, with the quality of play that he is, and the quality that Chelsea have, right? You just assume that, like, put him around quality players, he's quality himself, and you give him good dynamics in which to function, right? It's a bit similar like Salah, right? Like, he's got a lot of good players around him. He is a world-class player himself. He's just been platformed in a way which really hasn't served him so far, and it kind of just hasn't gone his way either. You could criticize his performances, but honestly, I don't think they've been that bad. He's also operating from a really low volume, so whenever he does like miss, it's not like he's going miss, score. He's just going miss, and it's just getting cut off. He's not getting another chance. But anyway, returning to the Brazilian, as long as the dynamics are a bit better than they were against Forest, and they probably have to be considering how bad that first half was against Forest. Even the second half, we didn't have that much. And Enzo probably comes back into the side. I think he's good enough to keep. Especially when you consider the other fixtures that these guys have. For example, Mateta has Arsenal. Voltamada, who I speak about later, has Fulham, which I think could be very tough, as well as he's playing. And then, at least with JP, is if he does do well, he has Spurs away, which, to be fair, they've been very poor at home. So from that standpoint, I think he could do well. Then we've got Wolves at home, who've been very poor overall. Then Burnley, who haven't been so great defensively, even against Leeds, very lucky to keep a clean sheet. And then there's Arsenal, tough, but then it's Leeds, right? Which, to be fair, they've been quite solid defensively. So I'm not going to doubt him in that fashion. But you can see that he could turn into a very good pick. It's just very much about the dynamics. And with Enzo back in training, as we're about to speak about, and the fixture, I'd give it one more. Moving on to Chelsea assets, and someone who was in high demand last week, and I expect will be so this week, and that is Enzo Fernandez, who's back in training. And I'm recording this video before the Chelsea-Ajax game, so maybe he's on the bench, maybe he's not in the squad, but he probably is. And who knows, maybe he starts, in which we'll have some more information, and I can develop on this in SYP. Let's just assume, though, for argument's sake, and I think this is the most likely outcome, that he does start against Sunderland. I would say his set of fixtures from 9 to 12, Sunderland at home, Spurs away, Wolves at home, Burnley away, that set for him, in terms of what he does in the team, I'd say they're quite high floor set, right? With the fact that he's still playing an advanced role, yeah, his box crashing may be limited if the other sides block well. Yeah, he's not the most prolific number 10 you've ever seen, because he's not really that type of player, right? He's more of a deep lying playmaker, who can give you good value defensively as well. But given the way Maresca's playing him, the fact he's still going to be in and around there, the fact he still doesn't just solely rely on box crashing, he can get returns, right? He's also got set pieces to an extent. So you wouldn't be surprised to see him return here. I just think for him to haul, I'm not super confident in it. But to return, I'm not surprised. I wouldn't be surprised at all. So if you want that type of asset for, I think, 6.7 million, 90-12 with the fixtures, go for it. Right? Like, I do like it to an extent. I'm slightly concerned about the ceiling, but other than that, go for it. Yeah. I don't really have much more to say than that. I like it. I just don't think it's amazing. I do like it. Prior to the United game, I said that I thought Sunderland's defence had been a bit lucky, or Sunderland's defensive record wasn't exactly representative of where they're at in terms of the whole league at the moment. And they've maybe got a bit lucky in moments. And I stand by it, even following the 2-0 win against Wolves. And I'm actually going to use that as an example. So I'm going to switch to Google here so I can make sure I have all the fixtures. Right. They start with, look, first of all, they've been very good at home. And I'm not trying to take away from what they've done, right? I'm just saying that they haven't been as good as other people have made out to them to be, right? Better than expected, 100%. But I just don't think they've been as good, right? Sunderland, they get West Ham, who are in pretty much disarray from the opening day of the season. Potter's quickly sacked. So a very good time to play them. Game week 2, they're away to Burnley. They didn't cause them too many problems, and I thought it was a fair Burnley win from what I saw. Game week 3, I thought Brentford had enough chances to put them away. They obviously miss a penalty. Sharda takes it when Thiago took it 2 weeks prior and scored. A little bit of luck involved there. Palace Sunderland, I thought they were pretty lucky again not to concede. I mean, Palace had a flurry of chances, more than enough to score. High enough quality ones to score as well, but they don't. Villa, they face them right at the end of their, what you want to call a downswing, because straight after that, they bounced back. They went 5 on the trot, and they had 10 men and still grinded the result, which really shouldn't be happening against the side of Villa's quality. Play Forest at a time when nothing is going right for them. Again, I thought Forest had enough to score at least once, if not more. Play United, didn't really lay a glove on them, and play a very poor Wolves side, right? So the timings of these fixtures, when they play these teams, I think has been incredibly favourable towards them. And again, like, I'm not saying they've not played any good football, because obviously they had to have done to get to this position in the first place and to put themselves in a position to be lucky. But I do think they've been extremely lucky, right? However, I specifically looked to the United game, right? A side with a lot of attacking quality, who aren't exactly in their best moment, but have a lot of attacking quality. And the defense is decent, nothing special, right? And maybe the Palace game, right? They had a few players out of that game as well, but they still managed to create a lot and cause them problems. I don't think they'll be able to go to Chelsea and stop us, like, not just attacking, but scoring goals, right? Can they score? Yeah, I rate their attack. Their attack is something that I have no quarrel against. I like Isidore. What I've seen from Isidore, I really like. So I wouldn't be surprised if they score against us, and we're going to come on to that. But in terms of the defense, I don't see them keeping us out. And I think the fixtures, again, are painted in one particular, and the results of them have painted one particular kind of picture that's not entirely accurate when you look a bit deeper. Then Everton, look, they're at home. And Everton are good. They're not great, but they're good. And as such, if they kept something there or got something, I wouldn't be surprised. But after that, they have Arsenal at home. You're not really expecting much there. Away to Fulham, who have had struggles against blocks in the past. But with Kevin and even Josh King in the middle, I think their ability to help Sunderland will be far better than if it was last season. Bournemouth, who I would expect on the day, especially if Semenyo is in form, to have too much quality. Away to Liverpool. Away to City. At home to Newcastle, which would be a great derby to watch, but tough. Away to Brighton, who actually, you wouldn't be surprised if they got a result there. But my point is, like, the fixtures that haven't been played: Chelsea, Arsenal, Bournemouth, Liverpool, City, Newcastle, even Everton, Fulham as well, who are quality in their own right in the next 8. That's the entirety of the next 8. And I think the fixture runs and the timings have been very favourable, and the results essentially are not quite reflective of what's really going on. And I would expect there to be a significant downturn in at least the goals they concede. Results and goals scored, that I can see maybe continuing to some extent. Not particularly likely in terms of results, but goals conceded, I didn't see it happening. And I expect Chelsea to score 2+. That's why if you wanted to go for Enzo, like, with the fact that we'll score 2+, in my opinion, I think there's a good enough floor there. And keeping JP. Defensively, however, like I said, I really like Isidore and I like what they're doing going forwards. And we're still not that solid. Should have conceded against Benfica where we kept a clean sheet. Should have conceded multiple times against Forest where we kept a clean sheet. We had Spurs after this, who have been pretty poor at home, but you still expect them to cause us some troubles, some moments. And maybe we give them a game which is, implement a game model which is actually more suited to their side. So I don't think a defensive asset from our team is anywhere near essential. If you wanted to go Reece, I'd get it, right? Because Reece in a slightly more attacking role is a great prospect, but he probably doesn't hit DEFCON this week, and he's quite expensive, right? All things considering, given the other options that are cheaper, he's quite expensive. You have your Senessis, you have your Andersons, you have your Richards, who's so good on DEFCON. You have Michael Keane now, given Branthwaite's got surgery. And at the same price point, you've got like Munoz for 0.2 more, who I think you'd take. So I'd be a little bit careful there. Gyokeres is even more expensive, and he's not playing as an attacking a role because it's a bit more balanced between him and Reece now. And again, DEFCON as well, not super likely to get it in this type of game. So again, I don't think you need to go here. If you want to, like, I get it with the fixtures, but I think it's far from essential. What will likely be a fairly short section on captaincy. And with the picture on screen, you can guess who I'm going for, and that will be Erling Haaland. I thought I'd speak about the alternatives, and if you go elsewhere this week, I get it, because Villa have won 5 in a row, so good on them. They are at home, and at home, with Amadou Onana in the side, with Kamara, with how Emery likes this out. For example, last season we saw this very, very, very compact 4-2-4 where the space between the lines was so minimal. Everything about the out possession performance was really, really good. They can make it tough for City. He also doesn't have a great record there, and he's a forward, and maybe you want to go for a mid to capture some upside. So I would get it, right? Like, I don't think it's that bad of a play. The options that are available, I guess you go Bruno Fernandez maybe. It's just that Brighton is so tough to call because we talk about big game Brighton so much on this channel, right? And they always just turn up in these games, right? You just look at the results from this season. And yeah, United are coming off a big win away at Anfield, but I'd honestly say it's probably no worse time to play Brighton. You probably want to play Brighton when you're looking down and out because maybe they'll give you something. But the second they have a big task, they seem so good. So a little bit cautious about going there because I think of all the fixtures this game week, it's probably the one I'd least likely to predict, or least like to predict. Saka, I get it at home to Palace. It's just that they still do have a spread of output, and you're not as confident in him hauling as you would be if Salah was in form, or Palmer was in form, or Bruno was in form, or Foden was in form, and playing in a better role for Bruno, right? And like, you could go Salah, but like they're in complete disarray at the moment, Liverpool. And he even got hooked, so maybe he gets hooked a little bit earlier against Brentford. You wouldn't really like that. And I guess we'll see what happens in Champions League against Eintracht Frankfurt tonight, which will be a hard place to go. So the options aren't great, right? But they're there. And this is why I say I can't really justify it, because whilst they're there, like I said, they're also not great. And if you're going to go against this type of guy, I think you almost need someone who is great because his floor is so high. The chance of him not having at least maybe 2 big chances made for him in the game is quite minimal. Whether his teammates make it or he just does something magnificent like he did against Brentford and practically makes it himself, like, he's going to get in at some point. He's just playing so well. It's not guaranteed, but it's almost that. And as such, if he scores 1, and let's just say you give him 2 bonus, well, now he's on 8. So to really like make this risk worth it, you'd want someone who could hit 18, 16, 18. And Bruno at home to Brighton, he could. He honestly could, especially with DEFCON. But again, I think it's a very difficult fixture to predict. Saka's not as explosive as some of the other big boys, right? He's a bit more he's more consistent than most of them. And Salah's out of form. So the potential loss is very high. And I know like the lowercase p is usually for probability, but I'm using like potential here. The potential loss is very high because he could score a hat-trick, right? He's in that type of form where he can hurt anyone. And your player realistically could blank if you're captaining any of Bruno, Saka, and Salah. Whereas the realistic gain, I mean, Han's still probably, even if he just gets an assist, and your guy's probably not going to haul, right? Like, he could, he's just probably not going to. I don't think the risk is warranting of the reward here, especially when Haaland's ceiling. There's one thing to have such a high floor, but it's another thing to also possess the ceiling he does. Yeah, I wouldn't do it. Like, Saka's got a high floor, for example, right? Such a good player, has so many good moments in games, so many routes to points that you can see him getting a return basically every game. But the ceiling, those big boy hauls, not as much. Whereas this guy, he's got everything going for him. So, like I said, Vigasa, I get it. I just wouldn't. I think it's very difficult to justify this week. To conclude, I will be taking a look at some popular transfers in and some exciting picks, as well as Sean Dyche's Nottingham Forest and what we maybe can expect from them. Just a couple words on them. Baltimore is playing really well, and the first time I properly watched him was against Arsenal, and I loved what I saw. I did tweet within the first 30 minutes because I was just so impressed by him. That being said, I think it's very difficult to justify using a free transfer on him this week, even though that he's the most transferred player in this week, because Fulham, as they showed against Arsenal, can be very difficult to beat. I thought they may go in a slightly different direction, considering a couple of the performances I've seen this season, but they did very well against Arsenal, and I think they're back in some sense of being extremely difficult to beat. And with Newcastle's current attacking dynamics, I wouldn't really say they're ones which are particularly well suited to hurting Fulham. And as such, with a guy who doesn't look like he has the high ceiling, similar to Saka almost, in a way that he looks like a high floor. Saka, I'd say his ceiling is more realistic though, and higher. I wouldn't go here. And like I said, JP's got Sunderland at home. So you don't really need to take him out, right? Because Fulham at home is definitely not a better fixture. And then in terms of Gyokeres, okay, I get it. And I don't mind it too much. But I don't think that like the Newcastle Fulham matchup is like way easier than the Arsenal Palace matchup to warrant it. And who knows, if Gyokeres scores, you probably want him for Burnley Sunderland. And it's not like Baltimore's fixtures are particularly easy after this as well. So I wouldn't. Gakpo, he's playing well, right? So similar to Captaincy, I get it. However, if he's having a poor performance for like 50 minutes, right, which is not long, Slot will hook him. He's shown that this season, right? He's not Salah where he's as safe in that regard. Like he will be hooked, maybe even pre-60, like 58. You don't want that in an asset, right? Fixtures, I guess you could interpret as tough. You can interpret them in any way possible, right? Because these three fixtures in particular, there's a lot of subjectivity about them, I'd say, as opposed to something like having Southampton at home after they get beat 9-0. But I'd still say with their form, right, and the fact that they look in complete disarray at the moment, there's so many things that seem to be going wrong there. They're probably going to be interpreted on the tougher side. And I just think the team is bringing him down in the sense that if he was playing in a fully functioning, fluid Liverpool side, they'd be scoring so many goals, the floor would be so high. But in this side where things aren't going your way, and if they have a bad day, maybe they just don't create too many chances for him. And I don't think he has a great relationship on the pitch with Gyokeres yet. I wouldn't. Right? I think there's enough going against Liverpool where you can just leave it. And if his ceiling was super high, I'd get it. And I guess you could just say it could be because of how many chances he missed against United. I just don't think that's super replicable with their current form. So I wouldn't. And we'll see what happens against Eintracht Frankfurt, but it doesn't seem like a particularly good time to play Brentford. Away, under the lights, hard place to go, right? They've had some really good results there, hard place to go, and coming off a very good win against West Ham. You can say that West Ham were really poor, yeah, but at the end of the day, Brentford still had to put in that type of performance. So that's that. United made, like I spoke about earlier, this Brighton game may be really tough, and it may be their toughest for this extended fixture run. But after this, I really like them. And if you wanted to jump the gun, not even early, but get in for what could be a tough fixture, I wouldn't mind it. I think Mbeumo looks like he's pretty much locked in that front three. You've obviously got Sesko, Cunha, Mount playing for the other two positions. Cunha, I think, mainly would just pretty much start every game as well. So it's mainly Mount or Sesko. But Mbeumo's in better form, so I guess it's a little bit of a safer play, and he's up and running. Whereas Cunha's still not that found that goal and assist, and sometimes the first one can be the hardest to get, as many people have found out in many walks of life, and will resonate with. So I think going in Mbeumo there, especially 8-1, which is not that expensive for a guy who's had so many chances generated for him, could be great. And then Bruno, penalties, DEFCON, so good on the bonus when he gets a return, like so good. And so much quality that he can produce returns for you in certain moments where most others can't. The role, ideal? No. Does it limit the ceiling? Yeah. But if you catch him in a good bit of form, then he'll be amazing. So I really don't mind it as a long-term play, either of those two at all. And it's something I'm going to look at come game week 11, let's say. But even before that, right, like I don't mind the fixtures. Not as great now because Postecoglou's been sacked. You expect them to tighten up defensively. And Spurs, following another defeat at home, may finally take that as a bit of a springboard to get better. But game week 11 could be a nice entry point. I wouldn't buy Trippier Jr. Like, okay, yeah, he may score against Forest. But Evan Nilsson, it's a small injury, Iraola said. He'll be back soon. You're using a transfer on someone with reduced expected minutes, very reduced expected minutes in the near future. I just don't think it's very efficient use. So I wouldn't. And then the last thing to speak about here is Sean Dyche and what can we expect from Nottingham Forest? My only concern is that in the game that after the game that Nuno got sacked, the West Ham game, they weren't particularly good there either. And the Palace game was just like in the middle, towards the lower side, but a little bit in the middle. But in general, the club just didn't have this great atmosphere there. It didn't have this great atmosphere under Postecoglou. So what happens if they go to Bournemouth and it just doesn't fix itself and the new manager bounce doesn't happen? I think it could turn toxic again very quickly, because I don't think it's a players issue, really. There's a couple positions, 4-back and 6, where I think they need to massively improve, or at least improve. But outside of that, I think the squad's quite strong, especially on the attacking front. You have so many different weapons that can be suited for so many different types of scenarios. I think it's more so from the top and what the owner's kind of doing to the club at the moment. So with that in mind, I don't think this necessarily just turns around. I wouldn't be surprised if it turns even a little bit more sour this season. And I would wait. I don't think this is the typical new manager bounce. I think you have to be more cautious. We'll see how they play against Bournemouth, which will be a tough test, and then go from there. That is all she wrote for this one, ladies and gentlemen. I certainly hope you enjoyed as I did. If at any point you did, a like, a hype, a subscribe, all would be greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for your support as always. Enjoy the Champions League football, and I shall see you tomorrow for my team selection. Goodbye.